TimeSplitters 2 is a veritable smorgasbord of characters, weapons and settings, with every level having its own unique personality. Having recently critiqued Free Radical Design's terrific sequel in great detail, click the card on screen now to watch that, I'm now going to rank those missions, starting with the biggest stinker of them all and finishing with the best of the bunch. Robot Factory is loosely inspired by the Terminator films' bleak tales of man's struggle against an unstoppable machine army, and that is also an apt description of how I found TimeSplitters 2's ninth adventure. It's not bleak in a compelling way like the movies it's based on though. Starting as it means to continue, terribly, Robot Factory throws wave after wave of enemies at you that are no fun to fight, and that continues right through to the end of what is the campaign's longest outing. That's a big reason why it is by far and away the game's worst level. There are big bots, small bots, bots as big as your head, and no matter their size, they're all awful in their own special way. Some have far too much health, others weak points that are tougher to hit than they should be, and some even explode when close with barely a warning given. What's more, the environment this mess of mediocrity unfolds within is the campaign's blandest, a drab mix of uninteresting hallways coated in greys and greens. The opportunity to use unusual weapons for a second time following Return to Planet X is initially a welcome one, until the sci-fi handgun and its bouncing bullets drives you insane, but it's not enough to redeem a mission that is, in general, a diabolical experience. That TimeSplitters 2's campaign concludes with a damp squib after the brilliance which precedes it, apart from you, Robot Factory, breaks my heart. Space Station, my choice for 9th place, is the second occasion you're faced with a countdown as you race towards a level's finish line, with only 5 or 6 minutes on the clock depending on difficulty. Its big problem is that even when you know what you're doing, that is an extremely harsh time limit. There are time splitters here, there and everywhere to make your life miserable, and you have to deal with space flies, one of the most infuriating enemies I've had the displeasure of coming across in any video game, full stop. All the while, you mostly navigate narrow corridors while trying to keep a grip on your controller as the timer ticks down and your palms get ever sweatier, with little else of note included other than the turret sequence towards Space Station's end. This part, by the by, is complete BS. It's not the gameplay itself that's the issue, but rather that there's a suit you need to grab to survive the harshness of space, one it's very easy to miss as it's hanging on a wall with nothing highlighting that you actually need it. Speaking of highlights, Space Station has none, and as such it deservedly sits in the part of my ranking reserved for levels I'd describe as complete toilet. I love James Bond. Heck, I wish I was James Bond. International Super Spy is a far more thrilling job description than middling British YouTuber. An 8th spot in my ranking, Atom Smasher, does a good job of making you feel like you're the star of one of 007's films. There is a supervillain you have to defeat, a secret underground lair, and guards dressed in classic 70s henchman costumes. It's bang on the money. Apart from the timer, during the mission you have to help scientists defuse 5 bombs dotted down a linear path, and you gain extra seconds each time one of them is disarmed. The problem is that Atom Smasher delights in chucking too many enemies at you while you're trying to find those bombs, making it one of the hardest excursions in the game. You will likely die or run out of time at least once, probably more, at which point you'll realise the checkpoint placement is also absurd, with you restarting practically at the beginning. Oh, and don't even mention the doors opening at a glacial pace or this stupid crane puzzle, both of which will stop you in your tracks while you quietly seethe with anger. If James Bond were to tackle this one, he'd need to down vodka martinis by the truckload just to take the edge off the constant frustration. And as for you, well, Atom Smasher will leave you shaken, but probably not stirred. Now that we're past TimeSplitters 2's trio of tripe, its triumvirate of terrible, the quality of levels on this list begins to increase dramatically. Return to Planet X takes 7th. It is by no means video game genius, but it is a serviceable, sometimes entertaining sci-fi romp. The weapon selection is the big draw here after 3 outings which all featured broadly the same guns, a pistol, a machine gun, a sniper rifle, and so on and so forth, with bouncing lasers and sticky plasma grenades adding much needed variety. The soundtrack accompanying your exploits is out of this world too. For all its futuristic firearms and funky music though, it's Return to Planet X's old-fashioned gameplay which lets it down. From its boring turret sections to several unimaginably irritating encounters with the space flies, it's a throwback to the original TimeSplitters' simpler gameplay contained within a sequel that regularly offers so much more elsewhere. It's not the only TimeSplitters 2 mission that criticism applies to, but because Planet X is such a monotonous environment in and of itself, the lack of ingenuity continuity particularly stands out. Some might find it a nice break from previous objective-based jaunts, while others, like myself, will perhaps see it as a relic, an unexciting blast-em-up which is very quickly forgotten about. To kick off discussion of numero 6, I have a riddle for you. What do you get when you cross a fast-paced first-person shooter with light puzzle gameplay? The answer is a mixed bag, unfortunately. On paper, Aztec attempting to mimic Indiana Jones sounds like a great idea, with set pieces like fleeing a boulder rumbling towards you being very on the nose but rather fun nonetheless. Where it falls down, however, is when it requires you to be more cerebral. There is absolutely nothing wrong with an FPS featuring the odd brain teaser, they can often be a nice change of pace, but what I take umbrage with is the complete lack of signposting as to how you're meant to solve some of Aztec's. This pillar puzzle is the worst offender, with how you're meant to complete it being unclear at best, and there are other examples which are no better, like these evil red-eyed faces you're meant to shoot. It makes perfect sense, apparently, that a civilization without guns would design a system for unlocking doors, which requires a gun. I like Aztec as it's the most unique part of TimeSplitters 2's campaign. I also loathe Aztec because what makes it so special is also, at times, its undoing. I've only mentioned series composer Graham Norgate's fantastic work on TimeSplitters 2's soundtrack once so far, and now is a good time for another mention given how much it helps elevate 5th place Wild West. Wild West is all about the atmosphere, whether it's that terrific tune playing in the background right now, the jailbreak to kick things off, or the dusty deserted streets you fight your way through, it oozes personality from every pore. It's so absorbing, in fact, that I'd have been happy with the level's 15-minute runtime being doubled, if not more, just so I could hang around in the town of Little Prospect a while longer. Wild West's gameplay, on the other hand, is much less rootin'-tootin', and that is ultimately the snake in its proverbial boots. The aforementioned rescue of Ramona Souza is a poor start to proceedings. You have to ignite TNT to blow a hole in the jail, but the only way to do so is by shooting exploding boxes, a strange solution to say the least. I generally despise exploding red barrels in video games, but surely this was an occasion when one or two of them actually would have been appropriate. Beyond that, gameplay mostly consists of straightforward gunplay you'll have seen before, and the showdown with end boss the Colonel is underwhelming. A mission I always enjoy replaying, Wild West's ambience is top tier, but its gunslinging isn't quite good enough that I can place it above those still to come. Like Wild West, the level finishing 4th, Notre Dame, lives and dies by its atmosphere. The difference between them, however, is that Notre Dame also has plenty of horrifying gameplay and frightening variety to match its mood. A lot of TimeSplitters 2's levels require a degree of brains and brawn to successfully conquer, whereas this gothic horror relies solely on the latter. Armed with a shotgun, you face hordes of zombies from the outset as you battle your way through the cathedral rescuing hapless maidens as you go, the only issue you need to think about being how to avoid becoming the undead's next meal. What I love most about Notre Dame is that although it's fairly railroaded, its pacing is spot on. For a time, blasting the heads off monsters is your primary pursuit, but just as that is beginning to get boring, everything gets taken up a notch. First comes one of the game's finest set pieces as you fend off monsters alongside the shotgun-wielding hunchback of Notre Dame, then you battle a towering demon, a challenge that at first seems insurmountable, before you finally take down the evil Jacques Delamorte on the roof during a storm. It is a scream from start to finish that I can find little fault with, and it not making my top 3 only serves to highlight how amazing that final trio is. A deserved podium finisher, NeoTokyo takes my TimeSplitters 2 bronze medal. This cyberpunk-inspired, Blade Runner-esque affair has an outstanding first 5 minutes or so, as you tail a member of a hacker gang through neon-lined, rain-slick streets while dodging security cameras and flying police cars. There are those who have complained this section is too difficult, but in fairness it's really not. The temporal uplink shows you exactly the lines of sight you need to avoid. It's basically the radar from Metal Gear Solid, and a very useful tool indeed, but Free Radical doesn't prompt you to use it, another example of poor signposting and the reason the section can be tricky for some. Using security cameras to get hold of the password which grants you entry to the gang's headquarters after, taking pictures of their plans and then uploading them to the police, it's all suitably futuristic aesthetic and enhances NeoTokyo's one-of-a-kind ambience as well. Its only big downside is that the streets you tiptoe through at its start aren't utilised as much as they should have been. You do get to revisit them after escaping the base during the level's first sustained period of combat, which includes a strange non-boss fight, but it's all over in a flash, and I can't help but feel like Free Radical could have further utilised the city setting. Regardless, NeoTokyo is a triumph of imagination, which definitely leaves a lasting impression. Chicago is a hard-boiled detective story, and a very good one at that, telling the gripping story of gangsters, detectives and death in 1932. Like NeoTokyo, Chicago is another of TimeSplitters 2's open missions, but its less rigid structure and the opportunity to explore more gives it the edge and second place in my ranking. Although it starts off slow, it doesn't take long for the level to heat up, fending off gangsters in the street with a Tommy gun as the pitch-perfect backing track plays. The same song you can hear right now is thrilling, although this surprise objective which appears out of nowhere I'm not such a huge fan of. While the play area you're left to stroll around seems huge to begin with, it's also really well designed, with a couple of larger explorable buildings dotted along the path which eventually lead you straight to your final destination. The objectives you have to complete are varied as well, from helping escort an informant safely to his hideout to calling a taxi so you can use it to sneak into a club where a mob boss awaits. He is also the final boss, so to speak, and like every encounter of his type, all you do is shoot while he stands there, which isn't particularly engaging. Thankfully, the rest of Chicago is spot on, and it remains one of the franchise's best levels. At long last, we arrive at the cream of the crop, the creme de la creme, TimeSplitters 2's #1 level, Siberia. During my TimeSplitters 2 analysis, again I highly recommend it if I do say so myself, click the card on screen now to have a gander, I made the claim that Siberia isn't just the best level in the game, but one of the best in the entire genre, and I wholeheartedly stand by that opinion. It's not one particular aspect of the mission which makes it so perfect, but rather how lots of little things combine. When it comes to gameplay, you can charge in with reckless abandon and shoot everything which moves in the face, or you can be sneaky, staying in the shadows and picking off guards before they even know you're there. Siberia's level design is flawless too. Working through its various tasks takes you across the whole dam and into its depths, at which point a pair of elevators are unlocked, allowing you easier travel around the facility while you tie up any loose ends. Unlike Return to Planet X, it's the right mix of old and new too, TimeSplitter's quirky aesthetic and tone blending with GoldenEye and Perfect Dark's objective-based gameplay to create an espionage thriller unlike anything else I've ever played. I mean, come on, creeping silently through an enemy base before a sudden, unexpected zombie outbreak throws everything into disarray, chaos you can only escape after battling an attack helicopter atop the dam. What's not to love? Siberia is Free Radical at their brilliant best, their years of experience and their desire to fashion something special, resulting in one of the best first-person shooter missions of all time. And with the campaign's 10 levels done and dusted, we reach the end of my rankings. Do you agree? Disagree? Do you think I'm chatting absolute cake? Do let me know in the comments. What I will say is that even TimeSplitters 2 at its very worst is still a lot better than many other shooters out there, and I cannot recommend it enough if you've yet to try it yourself. With that, thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and time travellers. If you enjoyed yourself, do consider liking, subscribing and sharing your rankings, and hopefully we'll hang out again soon.